Good evening, and thank you for attending tonight's webinar. 2020 was an extremely challenging year for everyone. We felt it was important to provide our community with helpful tips for managing change and grief. We're honored tonight to have Leslie Holly join us as our guest speaker. Ms. Holly is a board certified counselor with Healing Circle. So without further ado, we'll hand things over to Leslie.
Thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be here this evening to talk about COVID fatigue and how it affects the African American community and how it affects all of our friends and family. It definitely has been a trying 2020 and going into 2021. So a little bit about myself. I am in private practice in downtown Silver Spring, Maryland. I see clients that are suffering from depression and anxiety, life transitions. I help clients establish healthy boundaries with friends and family members and close ones. I also work with couples with intimacy issues and communication issues and adolescents as well. I started a long journey in private practice in Chicago, working for a large group practice, doing operations, setting up practices, working with clients, working with insurance companies. So I have a lot of expertise in setting up private practices and startups. And I'm also a board member of the Maryland Counseling Association Multicultural Division for the Maryland Counseling Association. So I do board work to make sure that we can advocate for counselors and for the mental health field, as well as our multicultural population. I'm also a presenter, so I have presented on COVID and COVID fatigue in the past. I've also done presentations on sexual trauma, a hostile work environment, communication in the work environment, mindfulness, and I specialize in working with trauma, life transitions, depression, and anxiety. So thank you for being here tonight. I hope that everyone gets some really great information. For our goals tonight, we're going to be talking about stages and symptoms of grief, because we can't talk about COVID fatigue until we talk a little bit about grief and what grief looks like. And then we'll talk about the symptoms of actual COVID fatigue, which is a new term that research is being done as I speak consistently about how COVID is affecting our communities. And then the cultural considerations that we want to be aware of that many of us are experiencing, tools for managing grief and COVID fatigue. I'll have some resources to share, and we'll also have some time to do some Q&A. We're also going to be doing some poll questions. So before we begin, we're going to do a relaxation exercise just to get ourselves ready to absorb all of this great information that we have today. So wherever you are, I can't see you, but I want you to take some time just to relax, maybe get out of your chair, do some quick stretches. And as you're stretching, I want you to slow down your breath. So I really want you to think about making your inhales and your exhales a little bit longer than the last, a little bit deeper. And when you're thinking about your breath, I want you to be expanding your belly, thinking about expanding your belly and then contracting your belly so that air is coming in and out from your belly. Okay, we're going to just release some tension out of our body, slow down our heart rate, slow down our breath. Okay, and after we're done stretching a bit, slowing down our breath, I want you to get back in your chair or wherever you're at watching this webinar. And I'm going to take everyone through a nice visualization exercise so that we can get started today. Now, for the visualization exercise, if you feel comfortable with closing your eyes, I ask you to do so. If you're not comfortable with closing your eyes, if you can just relax the muscles in your face, relax your gaze, and try to just absorb the information of that, what I'm about to express to you, okay? Just try to visualize what I'm going to express, what I'm going to read to you. This is taken from a guided imagery called The Beach. For a few moments, allow yourself to take several nice, long, deep breaths. Notice the cool air coming in, filling your lungs, and the soothing warm air going out. Just let all your thoughts float away as you bring your attention to your breathing in and out. You might mentally scan your body and notice if you're holding any tension in your muscles. If you are, just gently let all that tension melt away with every out breath. Bring your attention to your breathing. In and out, in and out. Let yourself feel more and more comfortable sitting where you are. In your mind's eye, you see yourself descending down a long, narrow wooden stairway towards a beautiful, inviting beach. Your bare feet feel the rough, weathered steps, and with each step, you feel more and more tension gently melting away from your body. As you continue down the stairway, you notice how the bright white sand stretches down the shoreline as far as you can see. The ocean is a deep shade of blue, with the fine white crests of the waves sweeping towards the shore. You reach the end of the stairway and step down, sinking into the warm, soothing sand. As you rub the sand lightly between your toes, a soothing sensation of relaxation gently melts through your entire body. The roaring sounds of the sea's surf, the waves crashing over each other, calms your mind and allows you to feel even more relaxed. Again, mentally scan your body and notice if you're holding any tension in your muscles. If you are, just gently let all that tension melt away with every breath out. Bring your attention to your breathing, in and out, in and out. Let yourself feel more and more comfortable sitting where you are. And as you're sitting there breathing, I want you to identify and visualize one thing that you're grateful for today. Just visualize it now. Maybe it's waking up in the morning, or your dog licking your face, or that morning coffee. Visualize it. And open your eyes. Okay, so now we're ready to absorb some new information. And we'll also talk a little bit more about this visualization exercise and how that also can be useful to you in this COVID fatigue. But before we begin, again, I was saying we're going to have some poll questions. So we'll have two. I'll give you guys 30 to 60 seconds just to go into the chat and answer some of these questions. So, sorry, the poll popped up on mine and I can't see the screen, but you can see the questions here. In the last 2 weeks, which of the following have you or someone you loved experienced? Difficulty concentrating, losing interest in activities, lack of motivation, difficulty sleeping, increased agitation, or none of them? Let's give you a couple of seconds to answer that question. 20 more seconds. Okay, we've got a lot of lack of motivation. We've got a lot of difficulty sleeping. That's big, 71% said difficulty sleeping, 29% difficulty concentrating, and lack of motivation, 57%. So difficulty sleeping and lack of motivation are the big ones. So that's good to know. So some of the information that you're going to get today is going to be helpful. For some reason, the poll, it's popped up on my screen and won't allow me to go to the next slide. Let's see. Give me 1 second. Okay, perfect. No. Hold on, guys, 1 second. Can't go to the next slide. One second, just some technical difficulties here. Okay, there we go. We did it. Perfect. Okay, so this webinar will be great for you because some of you are experiencing some of the symptoms of COVID fatigue. So let's talk about the stages and symptoms of grief, because if we talk about COVID fatigue, we can't talk about COVID fatigue without first giving us some information on grief and what grief looks like. So there are 5 stages of grief, and many of you probably have heard of these stages of grief. Some theories say that there's 7 stages of grief, but they're pretty much in general the same. So let's go over the stages. Now, if you notice in this diagram, all of the arrows are all over the place. And the reason why the arrows are going back and forth is because at any of these stages, you can hop back from denial to anger, from anger to denial, from depression to anger, back to, depression, back to anger, back to bargaining. So they don't have to be in any specific order. The goal is to get to the acceptance piece, which we'll talk about. But when you're in the grieving cycle, sometimes people don't get to that acceptance space. Sometimes people stay in that anger space, or go from anger to depression, or from anger to denial. So it's important to note that the goal is to get through the cycle and get to the acceptance. And some of the tools that we talk about today will hopefully help us manage our COVID fatigue and help us get to that place of acceptance. So the first thing that we want to talk about is the denial and isolation. So denial and isolation looks like us saying to ourselves that this can't be happening. Why is this happening? This isn't happening. This has to be a dream. This has to be a nightmare. We are experiencing a wave of pain that we're not that we're not used to experiencing. It doesn't feel normal to us. So we don't know what to do with all of those emotions. And instead, we just mask the effects of the emotions. It's like we're numb. We're not ready to just really digest what's happening to us, all the flood of feelings that's happening to us. It makes us feel numb. We just can't believe it. We can't even get to think about what we need to do next. We're just in a state of shock. We're in a state of denial. Sometimes when we go through that state of denial, we start to isolate ourselves because nothing seems real, nothing seems to make sense. So we withdraw, right? And we take time just to isolate, to kind of make sense of it all. So that's that first stage, that denial and isolation. Then the anger stage. With the anger stage, we could be angry at a lot of things. We could be angry at our loved one who passed away or broke up with us or created a new life event for us that we weren't expecting. We could be angry with ourselves for how we handled things. We could be angry with the hospital. We could be angry with other family members on how they're handling the situation. We have to find something to attach all of those emotions to. And the first emotion that many of us are comfortable with feeling and society says is okay is anger. Oftentimes when you ask somebody how they feel, especially in the African-American community, people can say they're happy or they're mad or they're angry. Those feelings people feel comfortable with saying. It's hard to say, I feel vulnerable, I feel unsafe, I feel ashamed, right? We gravitate to that higher layer feeling and we hold on to that. And oftentimes you can see this when you lose a loved one, family members start to quarrel about small things. They're just in deep pain and they need to hold on to something. They need to attach that emotion to something. And so they attach it to that anger. Now, I'll talk about depression, but let's talk a little bit about bargaining because many of us have heard the term depression before. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But bargaining is when those feelings of helplessness and vulnerability come up to the surface and we start to think about what could we have done different? I wish I had more time. What if we had gotten to the doctor sooner? What if I had gotten a second opinion sooner? What if I was a better person to that person? What if I had said what I needed to say? What if I had gotten them help before? What if I had done this thing, would that person have left me? We start to bargain. We start to think about what could I have done to make this different? And I really need to stress that feeling is a very common and to be expected feeling, that feeling of bargaining, that feeling of guilt. What could I have done different? We see this often, with people that are experiencing loss from suicide. What should I have done? I should have called somebody sooner. I should have done something sooner. And the reality of the situation is it's just we're in so much pain. We're trying to find ways of what could I have done to control it or stop it. The depression. So when we think about depression, there's different kinds of depression that we go to. There's typically two kinds. So the first kind is just the natural reaction to loss that we experience. What comes next with this loss? The funeral costs. Who do I have to call? What things do I have to gather? Who do I have to support? What do I have to take care of? And that burden that comes with the loss, right? Or a breakup, like I've got to move out. I've got to learn how to be on my own. Like all this change feels depressing. It's putting me in a depressed, sad state. All of these things that I have to take care of now that this event has happened, now that this thing has happened and the grief is set in. And the second type is more subtle. It's a deep sadness. It's just the reality that you're preparing for the separation. So you're preparing for the separation of this person is no longer here with me. And that feeling, that heaviness of that, my life has changed. This person is no longer here. The things we used to do, that's gone. Just having that person, that safe space is gone. That deep lingering feeling of emptiness that's there. So those are the two types of depression. Now, acceptance, like I was saying before, some of the things that we talk about today will hopefully help us move through the grieving process and remember these steps, because everybody doesn't always get to the acceptance piece, right? That doesn't happen for everybody. So acceptance also, one of the things we want to remember about acceptance is it's not a happy place. When we get to acceptance, it's not like, yay, I'm happy, I'm over that now. When someone tells you, oh, I don't care anymore, that's not acceptance. Acceptance is withdrawal and a calmness. Okay, so we've just accepted what has happened. It's a withdrawal of all of the denial and isolation, the anger, the depression, the bargaining, and it's just accepting what has happened. We withdraw from those ideas and those thoughts, those oftentimes irrational thoughts. We sit with the feelings, and then we become at peace. We just become at peace. There's a calm that comes over us, an acceptance, a calm, a peace. There is nothing we could do. Okay, so again, acceptance is not afforded to everyone. And so in order to get through these stages, we've got to unpack things and we've got to deal with things. We can't avoid things. So let's talk about the symptoms of COVID fatigue. So before we talk about the symptoms, I wanted to read this quote to you guys, but you can see the quote. And this is from a psychologist at UC Davis Health, who's done a lot of work on COVID fatigue and COVID stress, disaster stress, and how it affects us. And if you look at the quote, it simply says we're tired. We're tired of everything. We're tired of being careful. We're tired of being scared. It's shaken our lives completely. We're exhausted from it. We're really exhausted, and it's still going on. There's nothing essentially that's changed. I mean, we have the vaccine and we know that, but this virus is here to stay, and we know that. And it has a severe, constant, persistent impact, hence the fatigue piece of it. So when we talk about the fatigue, we're talking about abnormal is the new normal. So now all of a sudden, it's normal to get your temperature taken everywhere, right? It's normal to have to wear a mask everywhere you go. It's normal to only be able to dine in for 2 hours at a restaurant and have to leave. It's normal to walk in your community and see everything closed and no one on the streets. Abnormal is the new normal, okay? And not only that, we have what we call two types of stress, okay? So we've got intense stress and we've got prolonged stress at the same time. Both are very hard and difficult to manage, but in COVID, we're literally managing both at the same time. Not only is the stress highly intense, oh my gosh, when I leave the house, what could happen? Does someone around me have it? It's been prolonged. We're now into a year of this pandemic, and it's just prolonging, and we don't know when it's going to end. We know that there's new variants. We just continue to get more news about, the difficulties with the pandemic. How is it going to affect us in the future? It's just a prolonged stress coupled with the intense stress. And then you add a spice of uncertainty in there. So there's uncertainty about everything. We have no idea when we're going to go back to work. What's that going to look like? When my kid's going to go back to school? When can I go travel? When can I go to a concert? When can I go to a football game? I have no idea. We have no idea what this is going to look like. There's so many different moving parts. What is the world going to look like when the vaccine is accessible to all? What are these variants going to do? The uncertainty just continues to compound on top of itself. And then fourth, the things that we would typically do and things that I would tell my clients to do to help cope, like group exercise and hanging out with friends, right? And connecting with others has been limited. So some of the things that we used to use to cope with prolonged stress or intense stress have been taken away from us. They're not options anymore. They're not options anymore to go to group exercise. There's no options anymore to go to your friend's house and get a nice hug, right? There's no options anymore to try dating again and just kind of put yourself out there. Now, granted, there are some of these activities some of us are doing, and we'll talk a little bit about disaster stress and how that's affecting us, but it still feels different. There's a mask of risk that we all carry every time we leave the house, a mask of uncertainty of, I'm going to go out and do this activity. What is my risk? And weighing that risk. Gone are the days where you just walk outside and you breathe air and you do the normal things that you used to do. Everything seems risky when you walk out of that door. So talking about not only the COVID fatigue and the 4 pieces of that, we are dealing with disaster stress. And so Kay Hermanson, the psychologist, she's done a lot of research on this as well. And as you can see, there's 2 stages to disaster stress. And it's also important to note that we're still in this right now. So a lot of the stuff and the research that we have on disaster stress and how it affects us is still kind of being compromised, right? Because we've never been through anything like this. We're going on past a year. So what are the prolonged effects after a year? We're all kind of in a space of trying to figure that out. We don't know what that's going to look like. So with stages of disaster stress, the first piece is bonding. When a disaster happens, we get a sense of community. We start to create a sense of community, a sense of bonding around us. Early on in the pandemic, people were very gung-ho about stay-at-home orders. There were a lot of TikTok videos and videos about people on their patios playing the violin and just doing things to make other people feel loved and connected with, even though we couldn't be in physical contact. There was a lot of social media posts about that, of people finding new ways to connect and see each other and just be good to each other and give each other grace, right, in this pandemic. Well, now we've gotten to the disillusionment stage, right? So eventually all of that heroic spirit, that wears. It wears thin, the stress builds up. People start to feel like, I'm not optimistic anymore. How long is this going to last? Who's going to fix it? Who's going to make it better? People just become exhausted. They become exhausted with the stress of the disaster, and they don't want to deal with it anymore. And that disillusionment from the time the research has been done usually can last up to a year. And again, we're past a year at this point with the pandemic. So who knows what that's going to look like come at the end of 2021 going into 2022. But people are fed up. They don't want to do it anymore. And you can see this by many people now aren't staying home. Some people aren't wearing masks. There are videos of people having, high risk gatherings and just saying, I don't care. I don't want to do it anymore. But the pandemic is still real. It's still going on. And as African American people and Black and Brown people, this is not a game for us. We have to take care of ourselves. The stakes are higher. So we're going to get into the cultural considerations. that are affecting us in this pandemic. But first, we want to do another poll. So I want to ask you guys, and you have like 30 to 60 seconds to answer this question. Do you believe that counseling can help with some of these symptoms of grief, trauma, of COVID fatigue? Okay, we've got a couple more votes coming in. Many of you are saying, yes, absolutely. You believe that counseling can help with grief and trauma and COVID fatigue. Absolutely. Some of you are saying unsure. 88% so far are saying, yes, absolutely. Counseling can help. 13% are saying, I'm unsure of that. I'm not sure. Okay. Give you got 20 more seconds. See if I can end it. Okay, so yes, 88% of you say that counseling you believe can help. And 13% of you say that you're not sure. No one said no, so that's good. That's good to know. So maybe for the people that are unsure, maybe we can, talk and explore a little bit about how counseling can be helpful. And at the end of the presentation, I'll have my resources up there if you want to contact me to learn more about counseling services or counseling services in your area. More than happy to help consult with that. I provide free consultations. And for those of you who feel like, yes, counseling can help, maybe there's something you're going to hear that's going to make you think, yeah, maybe I need to call my therapist, or maybe I'm in therapy, but these are some things that I do want to delve into. Some of these cultural considerations that have been wearing on me that maybe I haven't talked about in therapy, right? Okay, so let me see if I can get out of the poll this time. Okay. So I still see the poll, but I think you guys see the slide. But if I can get rid of the poll, hold on one second. Okay, there we go. Okay, so cultural considerations. So it's important to note that 20%, that African Americans are 20% more likely to experience serious mental health issues, okay? 20% more likely. And not only are we 20% more likely to experience mental health problems and concerns, but we have stigma in our communities and also access concerns to getting that help. Okay. So not only is it sometimes hard for our communities to say, you know what, I need the help, but then in turn, when we want to go get the help, it's hard to get access to good comprehensive care by a qualified professional. So it's almost coming at us at both ends. If we've got family members or we're struggling with ourselves and realizing that we need to get help, when we go seek out the help, there's risk there. There's not a lot of trust there. And there's a lot of reasons why there's not a lot of trust there. If we look at these numbers here, if you are Black or African American and you get COVID, you're 1.4 times more likely to get COVID, and you're 3.7 times more likely to be hospitalized, and you're 2.8 times more likely to die from COVID, okay, from your white counterparts. So that's pretty serious. So this is something that we really want to think about when we're thinking about our health and taking care of ourselves. Because also, if you look at, we're 3.7 times more likely to be hospitalized and die. Does it even feel safe to go to the hospital? And I can tell you, just, some self-disclosure, when this pandemic first hit, that was the first concern I had as a mother of two Black boys. What does this look like for me or my mother or my father or my sister to have to go into the hospital if we need care? Who's going to meet us at that door? What kind of care will I get? Because what if I can't go to my doctor that I have handpicked out and sought out and feel safe with? If I just go to the general hospital, what that's going to be like. So when thinking about cultural considerations, the first thing we want to talk about is practitioner racism, which is a real thing. I did look at some research on some studies of white bias. One study found that doctors with implicit pro-white bias were less likely to prescribe pain medications following surgery to Black patients. A 2016 study found mental health therapists were less likely to call back prospective clients if they sounded Black or if they had a lower income background, if they suspected that they had a lower income background. A systematic review of studies on implicit bias among healthcare providers indicated 31 of 37 studies reviewed evidence of bias towards Black and Brown people. And for those of you on this webinar that are African American, I'm sure that you have experienced some of these things. I have experienced them myself when it comes to pain medications, when it comes to access to care, good care. And the thing that's important to note is it doesn't matter where you come from or how well you present. And some of these systems and some of these places you go, as soon as they see the color of your skin, your treatment is different. What you're getting and what your white counterpart is getting and the access to care is different. And I see this with my clients too, and working with them and working with their psychiatrists or their medical providers. So it's something that is a real reality for us that we have to face. Secondly, toxic stress of racism. So not only do we have to deal with this in the hospitals, in trying to get mental health care, but overarching, we have to deal with toxic stress of racism. Every day we have to navigate a white supremacist racist society, right? That is not for us. We have to deal with microaggressions. We have to deal with toxic coworkers and stress, and everyday activities, so it builds up and compounds over time, the stress levels that we have. And we're carrying around unsurmountable amounts of stress. Now, someone by the name of Spinks Franklin, Adia Spinks Franklin, did some research on toxic stress and how it affects the Black community. And she wrote that toxic stress leads to worse health outcomes over time, such as lowered immune response and higher rates of mother and infant mortality rates. We also know toxic stress is also compounded by generations of racism, violence, and oppression. So not only is it something that we're dealing with on a day-to-day, this is generational. Our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents, this has been compounded over time. And it's toxic, and it has mental health and physical health effects on our body. And then you add COVID into that, right? And then lastly, the other thing that I will note is the socioeconomic disparities. So health insurance is expensive, right? When you get a plan, you may have to be constricted to who you can see. We know medical bills can be expensive as well. Everybody doesn't have access to care because of systematic racism. So that's also a thing that impacts us as a people to getting the care that we need, especially in a pandemic. So I know that this is heavy stuff, and I hope that many of you just feel affirmed in hearing it, that you're not alone in this, because I really truly feel as African Americans, we are in battle right now with this COVID. I mean, yes, it's affecting everyone. However, as African Americans and Brown and Black people, there are serious things that we face when it comes to dealing with the hospitals, dealing with mental health care, dealing with getting good medical care. And that's terrifying. It's terrifying, and we are at battle. So there are things that we need to do to take care of ourselves, to make sure that we're healthy, because no one else is, if we don't take care of ourselves, nobody else is going to. So it's imperative that we, if we're not, we take the steps to take care of ourselves. So we have tools. We have tools to manage grief and to manage COVID fatigue. So let's get into that. So how do we manage grief? And how do we manage COVID fatigue? So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is exercise. Now, many of my clients say, Leslie, I don't want to exercise. I don't like exercising. I don't like running. I don't like going to the gym. That's fine. Exercise can start and look like I get up in the morning and I stretch and I do some deep breathing. It doesn't have to mean you're doing an hour of cardio. Exercise can look like 2 days of yoga and stretching a week. Start small. Exercise can look like me and my partner going on a walk after work 2 to 3 nights a week. Start somewhere. Don't think about, oh my gosh, I need to get a personal trainer and I need to work out 3 hours a day. That is not how we change behavior. Change is not linear. I always tell my clients that. Small steps at a time make a difference. Start committing yourself to a walk a week. I'm going to go on one walk a week and I'm going to do some deep breathing exercises like we did today. And that's where I'm going to start. Second thing, talking about it. We have to talk about these things, especially as Black people. We carry so much toxic stress because of all of these cultural considerations that we just talked about. A lot of times we feel like, well, why talk about it? Like it's there, it's exhausting, right? Hence the fatigue. Why talk about it? You have to find places and spaces that are comfortable to talk about these things. So if it's not therapy, maybe it's your church. Maybe it's your group of girlfriends. Maybe it's your mother. Maybe it's your grandmother. But talking about your feelings and how you're feeling about whatever's happening with you in COVID is important. Don't bottle it up. Don't keep it inside. There's something very therapeutic just about talking about things and processing things, making sure that you find safe spaces to talk about these things. And if you're thinking, as I'm saying this, I don't have anybody to talk to, now is the time to find some, maybe an online support group or join a meetup where they do Zoom calls. There's so many different resources, some that I will give you at the end of the presentation, others if you reach out that I can give you where you can do Zoom calls and do breath work with other people and talk about these things with other people. It's so important to not just bottle it up inside because that's just going to create more stress in the body. Constructive thinking. So our feelings come from our thoughts about a situation. Okay, it's not the situation that causes all of the symptoms. It's our thoughts about the situation that cause the symptoms. And it's so important to remember that. We feel a lot of things throughout the day, but then we attach phrases and words to those feelings that then color those feelings. So I always tell my clients who are depressed, if you're sad, it's okay to be sad. Depression is feeling bad about feeling bad. It's like I'm sad and now I'm going to judge myself for feeling so sad and that I can't do these things. And that's what causes the depression, not the sadness. The sadness doesn't cause the depression. It's the thinking that I'm horrible and I'm no good because I can't do the thing that causes the depression. So the thoughts are the key. If we can change our thoughts, if we can redirect our thoughts, glass half full instead of glass half empty, giving ourselves grace. I'm doing the best I can. It's a pandemic. Remind yourself, I'm doing the best I can. Today was a hard day. Let me just get through the day. Let's not beat ourselves up about I didn't get the thing done or I didn't even shower today or everything is so miserable. No, what was good about the day? I got up, I did my work today, and tomorrow we'll worry about tomorrow, right? Giving ourselves grace. Maybe I can cook something that will make me feel happy, right? How can we reframe our thoughts and have constructive thinking? It's very powerful. And if it's something that you're not doing, I suggest you start to identify the negative thoughts that you tell yourself throughout the day and keep a log of those. And you'd be surprised how many times we rip ourselves apart and how that doesn't help the way we feel. Okay. Mindfulness and gratitude, just like the exercise we just did, the visualization exercise, that's a form of mindfulness. You can use apps, you can find YouTube videos on mindfulness and giving yourself gratitude. And I will also have those resources on another page. Take some time off. You know, in COVID, I have definitely been a victim of this, thinking I can't take time off because I'm working from home. Like, how can I take time off? Take time off. You need time off, even more now than ever. Many people are working more hours now than they were when they were in the office because you're at home, your job thinks you're always accessible to them. So you're working crazy hours. So you need to take time off. It's your time off. Your boss shouldn't question, well, why are you taking time off? Well, I have 2 weeks and I'm going to take it off. Take that time off for yourself. Get involved with things that are important to you, which is the last bullet point. Do things that you enjoy, that you value. Spend time with your family. Sleep in, journal, set some goals for 2021. Take time off for yourself. Don't think that oh, I just have to work really hard. I can't tell you how many clients I have that eventually now started taking time off, but at first wouldn't take a day off. They were like, well, I feel guilty if I take a day off. I always say, if you take your last breath tomorrow, your job will find someone else to replace you pretty quickly. So you have to take time out for you. You have to value you. And that goes back to what's important to you. What do you value? What are your hobbies? What are some things that you enjoy doing that maybe you haven't done in a while? Sometimes when clients say to me, well, I don't really have any hobbies, think about when you were young. What were some of the things that you liked to do? Did you play an instrument? Did you run track? Did you play tennis? Did you want to start scuba diving? Think about some of the things and the hobbies and the goals and the values that you have for yourself, and how do you get back to those things? And lastly, just a few tips, ABCs, for COVID fatigue. Awareness. Are you aware of any issues that you have? Are you having difficulty sleeping? Are you having uncontrollable crying? Are you having lack of motivation? Are you isolating yourself? Are you having aches and pains that you don't know why? Are you having panic attacks? You have to listen to your body, and you have to be aware of what's happening for you in your day to day. Balancing your life involves putting the things that we value and have passion for in our schedule. So again, what are the things that I value? What are the things that I want to get back to? What are the things that I enjoy? How do I get that balance in my life? Maybe I used to do yoga and I don't do it anymore. Maybe I'm going to start doing that once a week again. Maybe I'm going to start painting again. Maybe I'm going to start calling certain people that I didn't connect with and doing board games with over online. But how do we create that balance and put it in our schedule and make time for ourselves? And then connections. Talk out your stress, process your thoughts and reactions with someone else. Again, therapy is a great tool that you can use. But you can also talk to a coworker. You can also talk to a funeral director. You can also talk to a family member, a supervisor. Again, like I said, I provide consultations. Make sure that you're making connections. Zoom is an interesting thing. I always say Zoom is like going to the gym. I dread sometimes doing my social Zoom interactions, but once I do them, I feel great. Like, it feels good to get on Zoom and talk to my friends and connect with them. And once it's over, I'm like, I'm really glad that I did that. I was kind of dreading this whole Zoom thing again. Zoom fatigue is also a term. But you feel good after you do it. You feel connected. It's like taking a vitamin. So making sure that you take the time out for yourself so that you can manage these symptoms. So now we have some resources to share, and then we'll get to our Q&A. So like I was saying, we have Headspace, Surf City apps. They have a great line of apps for depression, for anxiety, for worrying. You can check them out, and it's a free app. Calm, many of us have heard of the Calm app. Stop, Breathe, and Think. That app, it's just like a bell that goes off, and it's just silence, and you have time to do breath work in silence. But if you want something that's guided, Headspace and Calm have guided meditation, as well as going on YouTube. You can go on YouTube, put in meditation. So many different exercises will come up that you can try. Also on my website, on my resources page, I have some videos as well on how to do some of the breath work that we did in the beginning of session. And that could be something that you can add to your daily routine. I'm gonna do meditation twice a week. I'm gonna do a guided meditation twice a week. That's starting somewhere. And then lastly, here's a link on how to connect with others. So I've had a lot of clients say to me, well, I really want to give back. I really want to help other people. Like, maybe, I feel really blessed right now. I have my job, I have the things that I need, but I know there are other people suffering. What are some things that I can do to help others? So I put a link here where you can look and see food banks or donations that you want to give, how you can help others in the pandemic right now and feel more connected. All right, so now we are ready for Q&A. And I'll keep the references up here and put the contact page, but any questions, we welcome. We've got like 15 minutes left. And also, while you're thinking about questions, if they come through, I want you to know that there'll be a survey after the presentation. So please take the survey. We love surveys to know how we're doing. And here's some references. Let's see, do we have anything in the chat? No chat. No questions? No questions. Well, maybe as I'm waiting for some questions, something I can talk about since I'm a therapist is maybe some of you haven't done therapy before. So let me tell you a little bit about how therapy can go, just to give you a general overview if you're ever interested in therapy. Oh, we have one question. So yes, this was recorded so others can listen later. I'm sure that if you are an attendee, we'll make sure that you can get the recording so that you can share it with your loved ones if you'd like to do that. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions. See, no other questions. So while I'm waiting for other questions, if you can think about them, let me tell you a little bit about therapy, what therapy kind of looks like if you've never done therapy. So if you are looking for a therapist, I would really recommend that you shop around just like you do for a doctor, for an attorney. You want to find someone that feels like a good fit to you. Okay. You know, you're paying this person to share your personal business with, and you want to feel comfortable. So many therapists offer free consultations. I do myself. I offer free 15-minute consultations. Many do, sometimes over the phone, or they'll do it on Zoom or whatever video platform that they use, so that you can ask questions about their practice, about their theoretical approaches, and many of them are more than open to that. Okay, let's see. Here's a question. How to help family members who are in denial of grief from a loss, loved one, job, or relationship. How to help. So this attendee is asking, you know, hey, how do we help family members who are in denial of grief? Maybe they've lost a loved one, or they've lost a relationship, or they've lost a job. So helping others can be complicated because I always tell my clients, what can you control? We can't control others. We can only control ourselves. So in thinking about how can I help someone else, you can always let someone know, here, listen, I'm a lending ear. I'm a place to provide support. I have resources if you'd like them, but it's really that person's decision then whether they're going to take the help. So you can provide them resources and say, I really think that this group would be helpful for you, or this therapist, I know a great therapist that would be helpful for you, or I'm praying for you, but you can't make them get help. Now, if this person continues to maybe stay in the anger stage or depression stage, in that stage of grief, right, and not getting help, and it's hard for you to manage and hard for you to create space for that, it's okay to say to that person, hey, I really see that you're hurting. I really would like to help you. I told you about the resources. What do you feel like you need? And that person could say a list of things. And then it's up to you to figure out, can I provide them with that need or not? But ultimately, it's up to that person to get the help that they need. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So you can simply let them know there's resources available, and I'm here to support you in those resources. But it's also okay for you to establish boundaries if someone wants to just, or chooses to just stay in that anger and depression stage and doesn't want to move through that process. So you have to take care of yourself in that process, but it's also okay to share resources. Okay, another question. I'm currently in therapy. Sometimes I feel angry because of the loss of my loved one. Not all the time, though. How long will this last? I'm angry at the disease that took my loved one from me. That's a hard one. I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm sorry for your loss. And you have every right to feel angry. You have every right to feel angry. First, I want to applaud you for being in therapy and getting the help that you need. And when you said sometimes you feel angry, but not all the time. When we look at that state, the stages of grief, if you notice the arrows were kind of going all over the place. So that anger can pop in and out, pop in and out. It will eventually subside, the anger piece, and you will, I'm very confident, get to that acceptance piece. but it's just going to take time. I don't know how long it's going to take. I think it's also important to note that we're still in this pandemic. So it's so raw that you've lost your loved one because you're still also experiencing all that you are with the pandemic right now. There hasn't been any respite. So give yourself grace. Every day is going to look different, I'm sure. The days you wake up and you're blood red mad about it, maybe you're going to just get the bare minimum with your work done and call it a day. Maybe you're going to rest a little bit more that day. Maybe you're going to take an extra day off or take a few hours off. What are some of the things that you need to replenish and feel okay to get through the day? And just taking it day by day. I would hope by next year, this time, you feel a little bit better. But, when mourning, that whole first year is so challenging because you have all the holidays to get through, their birthdays to get through. There's so many memories that remind you of that loss. And so you just have to give yourself grace and allow yourself to go through that process, however long that process takes. But hearing that you tap into the anger and you know it's there and you recognize that and you let that be what it is and leaning into that will allow you to move through the process. So I wish I knew exactly how long it's going to take, but it's probably going to take a while. It's probably going to take over a year. And I'll wait for more questions. But back to what I was saying about therapy, um, get a consultation, shop around for therapists to make sure you want to get a good fit. A great way to find a therapist, two ways. If you have insurance, calling your insurance provider and asking them for a list of mental health providers in your area. They can email you the list, or you can tell them the criteria you're looking for: woman of color, age group, things like that. And they can provide you a list of therapists that accept your insurance. Or you can go on Psychology Today. Psychology Today is like Facebook for therapists. There's pictures of your therapist, of their specializations, the kind of insurance that they cover. And so that's a way to kind of get started in therapy. And again, I really recommend that you do the consultation piece. So now we've got some more questions in the chat. Okay. Are the techniques you mentioned good for youth as well? Young people are experiencing the same fatigue issues. Absolutely. 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 So one of the things I think that has been big for the youth that I work with and parents I work with and myself as a parent is having things that my kids can look forward to. Let's go on hikes. Maybe we're going to go camping. It's too cold now to do that. But what are some things that my kids can look forward to? We do meditation together in the morning and we set an intention every day. So modeling is so important for young people when they see their parents and their loved ones that they look up to using healthy tools. It's the best way for them to use them. So if we do the tools with them, maybe we start our day doing meditation with our children and setting an intention for the day. Maybe we want to start running. So we take our hey, let's go running. Kids love to do activities like that with parents. So that the working out piece, the connections, the video game thing is a thing, but it is also a way for kids to connect. So right now, a lot of kids are connecting on video games, talking to their friends while they're playing video games, because it's the only way that they can connect. And it's really important for them to be able to have that. Virtual parties, virtual birthday parties, still recognizing them on their special day. Therapy for young people. If you're going to get a therapist for your young person, I would say definitely get someone who specializes in working with children, especially if the child is under 13. They would give you good recommendations on what to do in a virtual space. If the child, it's hard to say with the therapy piece, because in a virtual space, therapy can be challenging. I know right now with my adolescents, I do 30-minute check-ins. But talk to your child about that and see what level of maybe attention they want. If they really want to try therapy and it's something that they're open to, then I would recommend that as well. So you want to definitely check in with your child during the pandemic and find out, like, what are the things that you're experiencing, and modeling some of these tools and doing these tools with them. Okay, do you have a variation of age who have concerns? So this question is saying, do you have like a variation of age of concerns when we're talking about these topics? No. This pandemic is affecting all of us in many different ways. It's so interesting to remember that pain is pain. I have young people, right, experiencing certain kinds of pain because they can't go to school, they can't be with their friends, their social development seems stunted because they can't be with their peers. I have young people in their 20s who want to be out and about meeting new people and are in the job market and feel isolated and socially stunted as well. I have people in their early 30s who really want to get married and have children and feel like, you know what, my dating has halted. Will I be able to date? Will I have children? Is that possible? I have couples who can't stand each other right now because all they can see is each other all the time and they really need a break from each other. I have single people who are really lonely right now because they don't have anybody to be with them. I have people that worry about their elderly parents that they can't see, or friends or family members. I have people with underlying conditions that are terrified or have high anxiety that has exacerbated their anxiety symptoms. We all are experiencing these symptoms. They just have different flavors to them. So we all have to tap into what our reality is and how this pandemic is affecting us individually. Okay, the next question. Are the techniques you mentioned good for youth as well? Yes. Okay, we did that one. So yes, they are. Is it smart to do group therapy versus individual if the family is struggling with grief? So this question is, if the family is struggling with grief, should they do group therapy or individual therapy? So that's a good question. So I think group therapy is really good for people that are on the fence about one-on-one therapy. They're like, I don't know if I really want to sit and talk to somebody. Why? Because in a group setting, there's a nice mix of people that really want to talk a lot. And then there's a setting of people that just want to observe and just kind of want to get comfortable in the space, hear other people's stories, feel accepted and feel like their feelings are being normalized. Oftentimes people that don't have a lot to say can really feel supported in a group because other people are kind of saying the same things that they feel. So that can be really helpful. Now, individual counseling, I would recommend for somebody who definitely has their own individual things that they want to unpack separate from the family. So if the individual is suffering with addiction or other disorders, they should probably be in individual therapy coupled with group counseling with the family for the grief group. Because if you're in a grief group but you're also dealing with addiction issues, that grief group is not going to address that, right? So sometimes we don't know if there's other things that we have going on, like lingering depression, until we get into a group. And your group therapist may recommend, hey, I think that individual therapy would be good for you as well. So both have their benefits for sure. Okay, have you seen much suicide because of the COVID pandemic? Yes. Unfortunately, yes. I have seen more suicide because since the pandemic, suicide rates have increased because of the pandemic. Suicide rates amongst African Americans have significantly increased because of the pandemic. So yes, this is not a game. This is a serious thing that we need to address, because suicide rates definitely have gone up. Now, just one more question. If anyone has one more, I can take. Let me look and see. I think I answered everything. Let me see if there's anything else in the chat. I think that's everything. Okay, well, we can take it over to Evan. And thank you so much for allowing me to do this webinar today. I think this topic is definitely much needed, and I'm so glad to just offer this information. And hopefully, if anyone needs to get in touch, please feel free to reach out. And Evan, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Leslie. for your guidance and tips for managing change and grief. And thank you to all of our participants. As a reminder, a brief survey will appear after we close the webinar. It will be included in a follow-up email. Please take a few minutes to complete the survey. Your feedback is extremely important. If there's anything we can do for you, please let us know. Thank you. God bless and good night.